Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Dr. Ruth Westhamer, a sex therapist and clinical psychologist, and today we are going to dive into something that a lot of people think about but rarely talk about openly. We are going to explore what actually happens when someone experiences sexual activity for the very first time, the gap between what people imagine it will be like and what it truly is, and how fantasy has a way of completely taking over a person's thinking and distorting their perception of reality. Let me start by saying this clearly. Sexual experiences are almost never as smooth, simple, or effortless as people expect them to be. There is something I like to call the sexual performance bomb, and it is always hovering somewhere above us, creating tension and worry. And this pressure does not just affect men, it affects women just as deeply and just as powerfully. Both partners carry their own set of anxieties into that experience, and those anxieties are very real. For men, the worries tend to revolve around whether they will be able to truly satisfy their partner. Will the timing work out? Will their body respond the way they need it to? Will they measure up to some invisible standard that nobody ever clearly defined? These thoughts run on a loop in the back of their minds, and that mental noise can become extremely disruptive. For women, the inner dialogue is equally overwhelming, just shaped differently. There is the uncertainty of not knowing what to expect, the fear of whether they will even find themselves comfortable with their partner, the concern about whether they will be able to meet their partner's needs, how much discomfort or pain might be involved, what they should be focusing on in the moment, and whether their partner will find them physically appealing. These are not small worries. These are deeply felt fears that shape the entire experience before it even begins. Now, it is absolutely natural for both men and women to carry these fears when they are approaching an intimate encounter with a partner for the very first time. Think about it this way. Whenever you are about to do something you have never done before, something unfamiliar, something new, your mind is going to generate a certain level of anxiety. That is simply how the human brain responds to the unknown. So in that sense, what people feel is not abnormal. It is actually a completely understandable psychological response. But here is where things start to get complicated, because what truly matters is not just that these fears exist, but where they actually come from. What is the source of all this anxiety? Understanding that is absolutely essential, and it is something that too many people skip right over. The truth is, most of these fears do not come from within. They are not born from personal experience. They come from outside of us. They are a product of what we have learned from our social environment, from the world around us. The kind of information that circulates in our society about sexuality, about sex, and about what sexual activity is supposed to look and feel like, that information shapes our expectations, our fears, and our beliefs more than almost anything else. This is a critically important point. In many societies, open and honest conversation about sex simply does not happen. There is very little healthy, factual, grounded discussion about sexuality in most homes, schools, or communities. And when a topic is not openly discussed in a healthy way, what fills that silence? Myths, misconceptions, half-truths, rumors. And all of these things do nothing but create confusion in people's minds and pile more weight onto the anxiety they are already carrying. The performance pressure grows and the fear deepens. So where exactly does people's information about sex actually come from? It flows through 2 or 3 main channels, and it is worth looking at each one carefully. The first channel is peer groups. Friends. From a relatively young age, young people begin picking up ideas about sex from their social circles. Friends talk, they share stories, they pass on beliefs, they exaggerate, they speculate, and those conversations become a foundation for how a person thinks about sexuality. The second major channel is the internet, and there is no denying it. The internet has opened up an enormous world of information. People can find content about sexuality, about physical practices, about safety, about health, and about almost anything else they might want to know. The access is practically unlimited. But here is the problem that nobody really stops to think about. Out of all the information that exists online, how much of it is actually accurate? How much has been verified by professionals or backed by credible research? How much of it is misleading, exaggerated, or outright wrong? Most people never stop to ask these questions. They simply absorb the information as it comes, without filtering or questioning it. And there is a very important reason why the harmful content tends to have a stronger effect than the helpful content. Human psychology naturally leans toward fear. We are wired to notice threats, to remember warnings, to hold on to negative information more tightly than positive information. Hope feels lighter, less urgent, but fear feels immediate and heavy. And our society feeds that fear constantly, from childhood all the way through to adulthood. Fear is embedded in the messages we receive, the stories we hear, and the lessons we are taught. So when information enters our minds through social channels, whether from friends or from the internet, we are already predisposed to latch onto the frightening parts. And then there is what people see in pornography. This is one of the most significant and damaging sources of sexual misinformation that exists today. When people watch pornographic content, they observe what appears to be extraordinary physical performance. Bodies that seem flawless, stamina that seems limitless, timing that appears perfectly orchestrated, sounds and reactions that seem wildly intense, environments that feel deeply sensual and perfectly romantic. Everything in that content appears polished, exaggerated, and designed for maximum visual effect. But what happens in the minds of people who consume this content? It becomes a benchmark, it becomes the standard. When someone has no other frame of reference, when no professional has ever guided them, when no honest conversation has ever grounded them in reality, they begin to equate sexual activity with what they have seen on a screen. That becomes their mental model for what sex is supposed to be. And then they bring that mental model into real life. When they are finally with their partner, they are not just present in the moment. They are running a comparison in the back of their mind. Am I performing the way I am supposed to? Does this feel like what I have seen? Is my partner responding the way they should? Am I measuring up? And on top of that internal comparison, there is often enormous social pressure coming from the outside. Friends build up certain moments as if they are defining once-in-a-lifetime events. There is this cultural narrative that the first time is everything, that it has to be impressive, that you absolutely must perform well or there will be consequences. People are told in subtle and not so subtle ways that tonight is the night. You need to blow your partner away. You need to deliver something extraordinary. And when you carry all of that weight into an intimate moment, when your mind is flooded with benchmarks and comparisons and social expectations, what happens? Your anxiety skyrockets, your body tenses up, your mind races, and then your actual performance suffers, not because anything is physically wrong with you, but because the human mind simply cannot perform at its best under that kind of crushing pressure. Mind works in a very predictable way. Feed it fear and it contracts. Fill it with pressure and it shuts down. But shift the focus away from performance, away from comparison, away from impressing your partner, and turn it towards something simpler and more genuine, like truly connecting with the person in front of you, like understanding what they need, like moving at a pace that feels natural and comfortable for both of you, and something remarkable begins to happen. The fear begins to dissolve. The body begins to relax, and the experience starts to improve on its own. Real connection is the foundation of real intimacy. And yet, for most people in those early moments, genuine connection is the last thing on their minds. Instead, they are performing, they are managing, they are comparing, they are worrying about how they look, how they are doing, whether this night will go down in memory as a success or a failure. And for women, the fears run even deeper in certain ways. Many women go into their first intimate experience with a strong sense of dread about pain. There are widespread beliefs that it will be intensely painful, that men will be rough or inconsiderate, that tenderness will be absent, that their needs will be overlooked. These beliefs, again, often come from social storytelling, from exaggerated accounts passed around among peers, from dramatic portrayals in media, and sometimes from deeply rooted cultural messages about what women should expect from intimacy. And then when reality arrives, there is a collision. In pornography, everything looked a certain way. Bodies were presented as ideal, timing was flawless, the atmosphere was electric, but reality is different. Real environments are not perfectly staged. Real bodies are not endlessly trained. Real people experience nervousness, and nervousness affects performance. And when reality does not match the fantasy that has been built up over months or even years, a person immediately begins to draw the worst possible conclusion. Something must be wrong with me. But here is the truth that I want every single person to hear and really take in. There is nothing wrong with you. What you experienced is what almost every couple experiences. Research and clinical work consistently show that the overwhelming majority of couples, something in the range of 99%, go through the exact same things. The awkwardness, the uncertainty, the imperfect timing, the moments that do not feel cinematic. All of it is completely normal. It is the reality of human intimacy. The tragedy is that because of the fantasies people have been fed, because of the benchmarks they have constructed in their minds, they are not able to fully live inside that reality and find the beauty in it. They spend so much mental energy comparing and criticizing that they miss what is actually happening between themselves and their partner, and that disconnection leads to dissatisfaction. It prevents genuine bonding, and over time, it erodes the quality of the relationship and the intimacy within it. So what is the answer? What is the path forward? It starts with stepping away from the pornography benchmark. It starts with questioning what friends have told you and recognizing that those accounts are often exaggerated, incomplete, or simply wrong. And most importantly, it starts with seeking out guidance from a qualified professional who can actually sit with you, understand your specific situation, identify your personal myths and misconceptions, and walk you through what real, healthy sexual intimacy actually looks like. This is exactly what premarital counseling is designed to do. Before entering into a committed relationship or before approaching these experiences for the first time, working with a professional gives you the opportunity to bring your fears into the light. It allows your myths to be examined and gently dismantled. It creates space for fantasy to be replaced with factual, grounded, compassionate information. And when that happens, the shift in a person's experience can be profound. Performance improves, not because some technique changed, but because the mental and emotional landscape changed. When the fear is lifted, when the myths are addressed, when fantasy gives way to reality, people are able to show up differently. They are present, they are connected, they are no longer performing for an invisible audience or trying to live up to a standard that was never real to begin with. And that is what I hope you take away from today. I hope you begin to see more clearly where your fears come from. I hope you start to question the information you have been given and hold it up to the light. I hope you allow yourself to let go of the fantasy of what your intimate life is supposed to look like, and instead, invest your energy into building a genuine connection with your partner, an emotional connection, a physical connection, a mental and psychological connection. Because here is the most important thing I can tell you: impressing someone does not build a relationship. Performing does not create lasting intimacy. Connection does. Real, honest, patient, tender connection. That is what relationships are built on. That is what makes intimacy meaningful. That is what allows two people to truly be with each other. And that is the most important thing of all. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today.